morning to discuss updates to the group gathering policy. We are so fortunate to have Compliance Manager Jennifer Vallejos from the Division of Finance and Tara from Purchasing to discuss some of the changes. Now, as per normal, we ask that you hold your questions until after they go through the updates. We anticipate some of your questions will be answered while they're presenting. You can put your questions in the chat and we'll address them at the end. And this training is being recorded and will be made available after the meeting. And without further ado, I want to turn the time over to Jen.
Hello, everyone. Sure, everyone's excited to talk all things group gathering. So let's just go ahead and we'll jump right in. As Emma said, please note your questions as we go through the presentation, and hopefully we'll answer some of them as we go. But if not, we're happy to take them at the end. So let's just walk through what we're planning to talk about today. So we'll talk about what a group gathering is. We'll talk about some key principles, followed by some of the purposes of having group gatherings, some do's and don'ts. We'll also talk about what approval documentation looks like and what the required documentation is. We'll also talk about some rules surrounding meals and snacks, lodging, and then lastly we'll talk about tips and fees. And then Tara will present on procurement and purchasing. Okay, what is a group gathering? It's two or more people meeting together where public funds are spent and the event is sponsored by an agency. So let's say you're going on a business meeting. That is a group gathering. Another example is you're holding training for a group of employees. If you're spending money at that training, that is a group gathering. You can go ahead and go to the next slide, Emma. Okay, some key principles. These principles override the whole policy. So when you have questions about any expenses, think back to these three things. You are required for the prudent use of taxpayer funds. You should consider whether the costs are necessary and reasonable. And the main goal is keep the state out of the news. Don't have any group gatherings that are going to cause taxpayers to question whether that is an appropriate use of taxpayer funds or not. Next slide. It's some purposes of group gatherings. These are general purposes. We realize that there might be other purposes that your agency feels is appropriate. Try to keep them in these categories. Whether the first one is to improve working conditions, improve employee relationships, improve employee health, improve employee performance, and provide information and training, whether that's to the general public or employees, whatever.
This has to do with group gatherings. It's finance policy.
Might want to mute yourself. Next. Okay, there are a couple of don'ts that I want to go over just to remind everybody. Remember not to spend any federal funds on entertainment, amusement, or social activities. And don't spend any funds on alcoholic beverages or anything related to alcoholic beverages like bartending fees. Next. There is one must, and I hope I'm not excluding another must, but the main must is follow purchasing code and policies. That's that is really the only requirement in this group gathering policy, is that you have to follow purchasing policies.
Jennifer, I'd say there's one more.
Okay.
At $1,000, you have to get your bosses to sign paperwork.
Okay, perfect. So in the past, you were able to pay per diem, and that exempted you from having to follow some of the purchasing rules. That is no longer the case. So that's all I want to say about that. And then Tara will present on the rest. Okay. Regarding approval documentation, before you decide what type of approval you need and what that documentation looks like, you need to make sure that all the costs of a group gathering have been included to determine that. So put in, if you're expecting lodging, put lodging on the form. If you're expecting to provide meals, put those meals on there. Put them in at the estimated costs of what you're going to pay. If you're planning on providing swag, that needs to be on the form. If you're giving prizes, that needs to be on the form. If you have presenters, the cost of the presenter has to be on the form. Include all your costs. Remember that no purchases can be made and no contracts can be signed without having the required approvals. So get your approvals first before you do anything. And lastly, this will make more sense after I present the other part, but I just want to mention that if your actual costs exceed your approved costs by more than 20%, then you have to create a new FI-58 and get those approvals again in order to be able to pay your expenses. Next. Okay, if your group gathering is less than $1,000, you don't have to use the form FI-58. However, you do need to document those costs somehow, whether that's an Excel spreadsheet, Word doc, whatever. Document your costs, and then you have to obtain written documentation of an authorized supervisor or higher, depending on the agency policy. Let me clarify that. The written approval is required no matter what. The depending on your policy is related to who has to sign it. So some agencies may be requiring someone higher than a supervisor to get that group gathering approved. If the costs are $1,000 or more, the FI-58 is required. You have to use the FI-58. It has to be approved by a budget officer, a division director or equivalent, and an executive director or designee. So remember that no group gatherings greater than 1,000 can be held without the approval of the executive director or designee. So those are the musts. That's the must that Tara was talking about, is the written approval piece. Okay, next. Okay, whenever you're paying group gathering expenses, this is the documentation that must be attached to your expenses. You have to have an approved FI-58, or if it's less than 1,000, it's written documentation of that approval. You have to have itemized receipts or invoices. You have to have a list of attendees and their business relationship with the state. The business relationship with the state is a requirement per IRS guidance. We have not been great at enforcing the documentation of the business relationship, but beginning now, when we audit, we will be looking to see that that business relationship is documented. So for example, if you are doing employee training and employees are the only ones that attend, like you'd say employees and list their names. Let's say you're doing a training, but the presenters are actually going to attend and eat lunch and snacks with you, then you need to list those presenters as attendees. Or if you're having, let's say you're going on a business lunch, you need to document who attended that business lunch and what their business relationship was with the state. let's say someone from GovOps is going out with someone from DHHS. They need to document that, let's say it's a van taking out Don Moss. They're going to document that there are two names and put the agencies that they're representing. Now, let's say that they're bringing in an outside person from another company. They're going to document that person's name and say the company that is attending and why they're attending. It's possible that the business purpose explains why that person would attend, but make sure that that documentation is there so that it's very clearly documented that it's a business lunch. Okay, also include an agenda. The agendas help to document what the business purpose is. It also helps to support why maybe you're having a lunch or why you're just having snacks.
Hey, Jen, can I ask a question? I know the instructions with the whole questions, but do you want to explain why these, I mean, we didn't make up these requirements. I mean, do you want to explain why these are requirements?
Yeah. Okay, so the IRS requires documentation of the date, amount, business purpose, the people who attended, and that is all just to document that it is a business situation and that they are not personal expenses. It will help keep that meal from being taxable to you as an attendee, and just supports that it's a legitimate business expense. If I missed something, Van, feel free to add there.
No, I think that was really well done. I think the point just is we're not making this stuff up entirely, and this is based upon some IRS compliance. And Jen mentioned some things earlier that were, you know, there's things that are prohibited under federal regs. She listed things that you have to document what your group gathering is for. And again, that's kind of to help us navigate to make sure these are allowable costs if you happen to have federal funds that are, you know, maybe even allocated that are used for the group gathering costs. So a lot of these are helping us to navigate IRS or federal regs or other types of things.
Thanks for clarifying that. Also, what you're going to need to attach to any expenses are documentation of quotes, if those were necessary. Tara will be talking about that. Copy of signed contracts. If you had a contract, you've got to attach those. Hopefully Tara will talk about prepayments also. She probably didn't have that on her list, but we'll just, she said that she will add that anyway. But if those prepayments are required, you need to make sure you have that documented also. And lastly, if your group gathering is over $10,000, you need to have some sort of documentation that the GovOps Division of Purchasing approved that group gathering. If you don't use the Division of Purchasing and General Services, then whatever your agency's independent procurement authority is needs to sign off on that. Next. Okay, the documentation has to be stored according to finance's policy. Right now, policy requires that any P-card expenses has to have this documentation in there. If you look at policy 21-2 P-card reconciliations, it says that you must attach documentation showing that you complied with finance policy and purchasing policy. This is why this documentation has to be attached. So if you have a group gathering expense on your P-card reconciliation, you have to have all the applicable documentation that we just discussed, including the FI-58 or approval documentation. We don't want to have to go back. We don't want to have to ask agencies for additional documentation. It just needs to be stored there with your P-card reconciliation. It is like an internal control to ensure that the approver has all the information that they need in order to approve that expense as a legitimate expense, and also that that expense complied with policy. Okay, let's talk about meals and snacks. The cost of your meals includes your beverage. And overall, that meal cost should not exceed per diem per person before taxes and tips. When you travel, your per diem includes your taxes and tips. We're making an exception on this group gathering policy to allow that the cost of the meals are before taxes and tips, just to simplify and make it easier. There are some exceptions. Some meals can exceed per diem when it's considered necessary and reasonable to meet the business purpose. Again, that is like a responsibility of the agency executive director to be justifying that it's necessary and reasonable to exceed those costs, the per diem costs. Remember that per diem may not be applicable depending on the purchasing thresholds and policies. This is entirely like a depends answer, because there's not going to be one answer that fits all. It's going to depend on the situation. And a reminder to you all that you should be using the Utah sales tax exemption number on these group gathering meals whenever it's possible. And keep in mind that the sales tax exemption number can only be used when it's being paid for with a state check or warrant or a P card. So if you're paying for that and then going to get reimbursed later, you can't use the sales tax exemption number. So try to use P cards rather than your personal credit card. Snacks and costs may be up to $5 per person with a limit of 2 per day. It had several calls about where's the timing requirements. There are no timing requirements as in the previous policy. It's what's necessary and reasonable for your group gathering. So for example, if you're having a meeting over the lunch period around noon sometime, maybe it justifies having lunch provided there. But if it's an hour-long meeting, it probably doesn't justify having a meal and a snack. Or if, let's say, you're having a 3 o'clock meeting, it probably doesn't justify having a meal. But a snack, of course. So just use your best judgment there and be ready to support it if you get questions about what you did. Okay, next. Okay, retirement events are considered a group gathering. You know, previously retirement events had their own policy, but a retirement event is actually a group gathering. So we've included it in the group gathering policy. So the rules here are very simple. If you have 20 people or less, you can have meals and beverages up to per diem per person before taxes and tips. So let's say that person who's retiring, they want to go to lunch, they're not going to invite more than 20 people. The agency can decide to allow that, and as long as they stay within per diem. Once you hit more than 20 people, you are limited to $10 per person for food and refreshments. However, pretty much like all of this policy is that executive directors or designees may approve higher costs, but they have to consider the reasonableness of equity between employees. What we don't want to have happen is where certain employees are getting more favorable treatment than maybe another employee. So try to keep that in mind as you're planning your retirement parties, that you're being fair and equitable across the board. Next.
Can I ask a question here? How do we know if we don't know the, like, how do we, if it's just an event that's being held at the facility, how do we know whether or not there's going to be more or less than 20 people?
Because if you invite more than 20 people, you're limited to $10. So it's all dependent on who you're inviting. Like, you're going to decide that before you advertise your retirement event. It's either going to be, you know, closed knit, invite only certain employees or certain people are invited, or if it's open, it falls into that category of $10 per person.
Okay, thank you.
For lodging, the requirement is that you have to follow Finance Policy 10-8 lodging. That requirement in there is that you live more than 50 miles away from the person's residence. Executive directors can approve exceptions to that. And that's pretty similar to what it was before in the old policy. And lodging rates should be at per diem. I know the screen says it must be at per diem, but there are some situations just similar to meals where it's going to depend on the situation, like if purchasing rules are involved or not. But really try to get your lodging at per diem. If it's available, you can go up to 300%, but only if per diem is not available. Okay, next. Gratuities are limited to 20%. This is a change. Before it used to be 22%. Don't know why it was 22%, but we're simplifying it. It's 20%. If you have service fees and gratuities, the two of them combined can be up to 25%. If your service fees are already 25%, you cannot pay any additional gratuities. 25% is your limit. And you can pay delivery fees if they're cost effective under the situation. Okay, that's it for my piece. And now Tara can go over the purchasing rules. Did you have slides you wanted to share, Tara?
I do. So I'm going to like boot Emma out if she could go ahead and let me present now.
Hey,
Okay.
Jen, can I make one comment, but I guess we're moving too far.
Yes, sir.
So the thing that you probably noticed is that oftentimes we have the term executive director designee may approve exceptions to one thing or another. Historically, the Division of Finance has kind of managed exceptions to policy and things like that. And this is an intentional effort by us to kind of, and you'll see this throughout not just this policy, but other policies, to kind of have executive directors take responsibility for, you know, whether or not it's appropriate in certain circumstances. I think one of the things that I was concerned about was sometimes we got exception requests that it's not what I would do, but if someone else feels like they could justify that if asked, I didn't want them to say, hey, the Division of Finance said it was fine. We are basically placing that responsibility on executive directors to justify whether or not those exceptions are appropriate. And so you'll see this throughout. Now, one of the things I want to also just kind of highlight too is executive directors are welcome to identify a designee that they want or that they would like to make those exceptions. So it's not our intent that the executive director has to be involved in all of those, but we want them to at least be involved enough that if they feel comfortable with a designee and that that's appropriate, that they go ahead and do that. So anyway, that's something that you'll see a little bit, not just in this policy, but possibly throughout those policies as far as where exceptions can be granted.
Perfect. Thank you, sir. Okay, so my name is Tara Utzler. I'm the trainer at the Division of Purchasing, and I specialize in the small purchases. And I'm guessing I'm going to specialize in group gathering as well because they kind of go hand in hand. So what am I going to accomplish today? I'm going to remind you a little bit about your agency's procurement authority, talk about the state procurement authority, when you're going to make the call for events of 10,000 and less, when you're going to send it for review, and I don't think I removed my last bullet point, so we're going to ignore that one. Okay, so what is your agency procurement authority? So before we get started, hopefully all of you have been in Google enough and you know how to use your little thumbs up, thumbs down. Can y'all give me a thumbs up just so I know you're awake for a minute? I got a few. Not your hand up, your thumbs up. So if you want to get the icons open, see the little smiley face at the bottom? Perfect. If you raised your hand using the little palm, go ahead and put it down unless you really have a question or I'm going to call on you. Perfect. Now, agency procurement authority. What is it you're allowed to do? So let's talk for a moment about small purchase, because this is going to impact your group gathering, and this is how we're going to look at group gathering from now on. So how much can an agency spend at one time in a single procurement? If you look, the single procurement is the total shopping cart right here and right here. That limit is $10,000. You guys get to spend $10,000 without coming to the Division of Purchasing. Notice, so long as you're using the standard small purchase, no quotes required, or you're using a quotes process. And you say, well, how do I know if I'm using the quotes process or not going to use the quotes process? And the answer is right here on your individual item. You're going to ask yourself, what is the highest priced item that I'm buying? And if the highest priced item exceeds $5,000, and that's a lot. I don't know about you. I don't buy things for $5,000 at home usually. Oh, that AC, it cost me more than $5,000. So $5,000 or more, then I have to get quotes. We're going to go on and talk about that in just a minute. But if you're doing a group gathering and you go, "She, none of my items are going to exceed $5,000. Guess what? Congratulations. As long as your total is not exceeding that $10,000, likelihood is you're not going to be talking to state purchasing. And you're going to go, oh, good. Thank goodness. Okay. Before we move on, though, give me a thumbs up. Can you do a sole source or a thumbs down? Which one? Looks like a lot of you say you can. Well, I'm going to say you can do a sole source so long as that individual item does not exceed $5,000. Why? Because I don't need quotes. So if I'm going to go out and I'm going to get a venue and that venue is $2,300, it's the only one, I'm not going to need quotes. So I can get that venue $2,300. I don't even have to call it a sole source. I can do that venue without quotes because they're charging me $2,300. Hopefully I don't change my numbers. I get this habit of like chatting numbers and forgetting where I am. Can you, when you're doing a speaker, can you do a professional service on a speaker? Meaning you can pick the best vendor and you can do the negotiation without state purchasing. Yes or no? I'm going to tell you, as long as your speaker is under $5,000, you can do it. The minute that person charges over $5,000, you can't do it anymore because you can only do quotes. And when you do quotes, you have to take the low man. So if your speaker exceeds $5,000, please, please, please talk to state purchasing because you have to do quotes. And if you don't want to do quotes, you need to talk to us. So as long as that speaker is under $5,000, how many of you have more than $5,000 to spend on a speaker? Give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down. Do you have more than $5,000? Woo! Jessica may need to be doing some work with us. Most of us don't have over $5,000. So again, we're going to be pretty good. Okay, so our next one, we're going to skip that. What is state purchasing's responsibilities? Any procurement that does not have a solicited contract or PO. So if you already came to us and you put a PO in place or a contract in place, we don't care. You can spend $1 million as long as your contract allows you or your PO allows you. But the minute you do not have a PO or contract in place and it exceeds $10,000, it comes to state purchasing. Or if it's $10,000 or less and you want to use a process other than quotes. And so that's not quite right. So, and the process is not quotes and it's not small purchases. So the minute you want to do a sole source, where the individual item exceeds 5 or the total exceeds 10, anytime you want to do a process that's other than these two processes, you're going to come to us and let us talk to you. Okay. Keep in mind, I did not actually finish that one until right before this meeting, and I should have read through. Now, what's our responsibility at stage purchasing for group gathering? Our responsibility is just to ensure you follow the code and rule. Our responsibility is not to force you in compliance. But I'll tell you that my team are taxpayers, and we may occasionally say, is it necessary and reasonable, like Jennifer used quite regularly? Is it necessary and reasonable? Or what are the optics that the news is going to see if they get a hold of this? So we will not force you into compliance. We will have you follow code and rule. But occasionally our team will say, what are the optics? Are you going to get us in the news? Because as Jennifer said, one of the things is to keep you out of the news. Now, one section in group gathering is going to say in B that if the event costs between 5,001 penny and 10,000, you may need to secure quotes. Well, of course, if you broke the small purchase thresholds that we were just talking about and it required quotes, you're going to have to get quotes. And then it says that if it's over 10, you're sending it to the GovOps Division of Purchasing, which is AKA state purchasing. So in my training, I may say state purchasing and I may say the Division of Purchasing. Either one, you're going to look at the same. So that's sections 2 and 3. Now, section 4 in that same B, number 4 in that same section, says, what if the vendor offers you free meals, room, hotel points, or gifts? You're going to comply with 63G6A 24. This is all the ethics part of the procurement code. If you don't know what it says, reach out to state purchasing. I'll give you that information here in a bit, but reach out to state purchasing and ask us. This one, I believe, is the code for employees' ethics. So when it comes to offering gifts, rooms, and all those things, you've got to comply with the law. Jennifer just put something in our chat. Just a second. Let me see what it says. Go ahead and read that there. I'm going to let that go unless she wants to hop on and talk.
Yeah, no, you can move forward. I was just answering someone's question. That was
Okay, perfect. So next one, number 5 in that same group, it says, if a group expense requires a payment before the event, that's called prepayment. The same rules apply for prepayments with group gathering as do anything else. If you have to put money down to hold a venue, that's a prepayment. A prepayment requires the prepayment form be signed by your executive director and by the Division of Purchasing. So any questions when you have, like, they say they want me to pay up front, push back and say, hey, the state of Utah will pay its bills. Keep in mind, if you cancel on them without having a prepayment, they're going to be pretty annoyed. So if you have a question about prepayments, that's why it says reach out to the Division of Purchasing. Okay. There's your signatures required. A bullet point 8, and I'm not number 5, bullet point 8. So somewhere in the policy, there's a number 5. It says bullet point 8. It says documentation from the Division of Purchasing for events over 10,000. You have to have that. So we'll talk about how you're going to get that documentation. Okay. So first, anything under 10,000, you're going to make the call. And I'm going to give you some examples when we get into this about how you make the call. So the first thing we want to remind, and I added this while Jennifer was talking, don't forget, before you start, get your sign preparation. I am just as guilty as you are. I do PEP seminars, and guess what? There have been times I'm like 4 weeks away from it, and I'm already deep in the planning, and I haven't gotten it signed yet. Don't do that. Don't wait. Because if you wait and send it to purchasing 2 weeks before and you want all this money, we're not going to be able to help you. So before you do any signing, before you do anything, before you start getting ready for that event, make sure you get your approval. So what I want you to consider when you're looking at purchasing is page 4 of the FI-58 form. Notice how it has all of these categories, and the form will actually add everything up for you. Notice it says if it's 10,000 or over, you're going to send it to purchasing for for review, you're going to contact us. We'll talk about how to do that when we get to the purchasing part. So we're going to look at this and say, how do I read this? If just because you send it to us doesn't mean we're going to do a solicitation. It does mean we're going to check it against code and rule. I had to see what my notes said. I was kind of lost there for a second. Oops. So remember this part? It says you may need to get quotes. Now we're going to talk about when you get quotes. That individual item, if I'm looking at it, let's look at each category in turn. So let's start with food. Thumbs up or thumbs down. How often is my individual food plate, my meal, going to cost more than $5,000? Anybody got an over $5,000? Well, no, I hope not. If that's a $5,000 meal, we're in trouble. How often are your tips and fees going to be over $5,000? Generally not. If you have a training that happens to be at the Salt Palace, it might. But if you do, everything's going to be over 10 and you're sending it to purchasing. How about a venue? How often have your venues gone over 5,000? Doesn't look like very often. Occasionally you might need to use the Mountain America or whatever the one in St. George is called, or the one in Davis County, whatever they're called. Occasionally a venue might be more than 5,000. So that's going to be a problem. But if your venue's over 5,000, odds are that your whole event's going to be over 10, and then you're going to let state purchasing do this review. How about lodging? Individual rooms is how they charge you. Is your individual room ever going to be over 5,000? Stephanie Richards says maybe. I can think of only one time, and that might be an Airbnb. Maybe. But often the lodging is not going to be. How about a presenter? We already talked about them. You guys said sometimes, maybe. But most of us are not going to have a presenter over 5,000. And this other, individual items in the other. How often do individual items in the other go over 5,000? Yes or no? Not usually. Not usually. Okay, again, if it does, you're probably going to end up coming to state purchasing because all the others totaled are going to be over 10,000. So take that breath and go, all of these items are not likely to be over 5,000. Individual items, individual meals, individual lodging, individual presenter. You guys are generally not going to see that. That means that you're going to do most of these on your own. Okay, now let's talk about scenario. When I get this, what I will do is I will go directly to this page 4 and I'm going to look at the grand total. At 3,200, would you expect to need quotes for this, yay or nay? Nay, because I only need to get quotes if the individual item is over 5,000. And so let me look at those individual items. Looks like my food is 1,700. So my individual food plates are going to be much less. And my lodging is going to be 1,500. So I'm really going to not need quotes for this. I'm going to make sure I've done everything. I'm going to send it in. It's going to get signatures. Again, I'm going to do this. I was on the wrong road. I said lodging. I meant presenter. So my presenter is 1,500 and I'm just doing food. Maybe I'm holding this one at a state facility. Okay, let's look at another one. My individual event total. Can you do this yourself or do you need to send it to state purchasing? Do it yourself, yes or no? You can do this one yourself. It's not over 5,000. You don't have to send it to us. Now, looking at the individual item costs. Do either of those exceed 5,000 individually? Does the food exceed 5,000? Yes or no? Does the presenter exceed 5,000? Yes or no? Okay, going to take a break for just a second. Do I need quotes? Yes or no? No, I don't. See how easy this is? We're going to do this. Okay, next one, a little bit more expensive. This time I have a venue. This time I have foods. Does it have to go to purchasing? Yes or no? Great, it does not. Does the food exceed my 5,000 individual? Yes or no? So I don't need quotes. And do my venue exceed my 5,000 where I need quotes? No or yes? Perfect. You guys have got this. Okay, let me see what's on the next one. Let's say that the venue charged us to eat with them. And so my venue's total is 6,800. But notice on my screen that the venue is one line and the meals are another line, with my individual meals only costing $20. My venue is my highest priced item because my meal is only $20 a head. Do I need quotes? Yes or no? No, because my highest priced item is less than 5,000. Great. Okay, going down. Now I have one more event. I want you to review this carefully. Does it need to go to the division of purchasing? Yes or no? Has it exceeded $10,000? So I got you. It hasn't exceeded 10,000. But what they were seeing that you might have missed is that presenter is over 5,000. And unless you're going to do quotes, how many want to do quotes for presenter? You want to do quotes for presenter, meaning you're willing to accept whoever the quote is, then go ahead and do quotes. If you do not want to do quotes for a presenter, then you're going to send this to state purchasing, at least the presenter part. You don't have to send the food part, but you have to send the presenter part to state purchasing and do an RQS in Vantage and send it to us. If you are not willing to do quotes and take the low bid, the low quote. Okay, there's your difference. Okay, when we talk about the rooms, I'm looking at Stephanie's comment. She says training for teachers includes multiple school districts for multiple days, so conference rooms, hotels will go over 5,000. The individual's room, Tara's room, will not go over 5,000. If they block it as a big block, then you might end up having to do it if that's how they sell it to you, as a block of rooms. But the individual room, Tara's room, will not be over 5,000. So Stephanie, you might want to reach out to state purchasing for that question when you have things like that. So keep in mind, state purchasing is always around to help. Even if your total's under 10,000, you're like, I just need you to run me through this one. I need you to run me through the next one, and then I'll be good. If you want to contact us, you're going to go to purchasing.utah.gov/contact-us, or just go to utahpurchasing.gov and click the one that says contact us at the top of the tab. When you get there, you're going to click this view pod assignments. And you say, why in the world would I do that? Because our team is viewed and put in pods. And a pod supports a whole group of departments. And the people that answer to those departments in our team have a specific name. And you would want to call that person. So if you're in the Labor Commission, you don't want to call this group. They're not used to working with you, and they may not have the best answer. Whereas this group of pod members, they know exactly how to answer Labor Commission's questions. So on the sheet, I obviously couldn't put it all on here. You wouldn't be able to read. Every single department that comes to the Division of Purchasing has a spot. If you do not have a spot because you are not a division or department in the executive branch, there's a group called the Courtesy Posting Group. Please reach out to them. Okay. Notice all documentation Jennifer mentioned has to be kept with every payment. When I do my P card for my my trainings that I do that are called PEP trainings, every single P card row that I've paid for that training has a copy of every documentation for that activity. So every P card row will have every documentation Jennifer said I have to have, whether that be I'm paying the caterer, I'm paying the venue, I'm paying the presenter. Every row has the entire documentations attached, as well as the receipt for that particular group. And then of course store it according to finance policy. If it's not a P card, your job to figure that out. Okay, now when you send it to me, you're like, oh goodness, when I send it to her, now I'm in trouble. Keep in mind, I want it to be timely. You send it to me a couple days before the event That's not timely, and we know everything's done. You want to get your approval on your FY 58 before you send it to us. You're going to send that as part of it because we need to review that page 4 to decide where we're going. You're going to submit it before you sign any documentation for a vendor. You're going to submit it before you're ready for the event, because if you've already signed something, we will be calling the vendors. If you've signed something, we're going to say, I'm sorry, you've already done the procurement. You've already done it your own. We won't have anything to do with it. And you will have to go ahead and pay for it without the backing or emails that you need as documentation. So keep that in mind. Get it early. When you're submitting anything over 10,000, go ahead and create an RQS Advantage, the standard way that you would ask to work with purchasing. We want it to be one same normal process, so you guys don't have to think and we don't have to think. You're going to email the group. This is the email. You're going to give us the subject, the RQS number. Please don't truncate that number, because guess what? If you put a different number here, Department 560 could have the same number as Department 150. And if you truncate this number, it causes us grief. Put the whole number. Now, here are the 3 things that are going to happen, or 4 things that are going to happen. First one is my team's going to look at it. They're going to say, hey, all of this is small purchase. We've done a deep review of your over $10,000 group gathering. And we are going to send you an email that moves forward. That email will be carefully worded. It's actually a template that says you can move forward. No quotes are needed. I don't remember exactly. And it will say under here, State Purchasing has not reviewed this to determine if it's a group gathering policy required. That's not our job. Remember, we're not allowed to discuss that. Second one is, we think you need quotes, but they're quotes that you can obtain. So we'll send you an email that says, hey, go ahead and move forward. You need to get quotes. Hopefully my team tells you which ones they need to get quotes. We look at it, and these are going to be the more expensive one. And we say, hey, there are quotes required, or maybe a professional service required for a presenter or something. And we're going to work with you just like we do with every other solicitation. We're going to help you, either ask you to get the quotes and give them to us, or we're going to help you get those quotes. The outcome will be a PO if you want a PO, or a P card payment. You will have to ask so Andrea just asked about USBE being part of our purchasing quoting group for purchasing help. You will need to talk to your procurement official to determine whether or not he will allow you to do that. Okay, that's your procurement official. So the final one is, and this is going to happen with maybe a Salt Palace type of thing. Sometimes we're going to need to do a little more of a solicitation. That might be a sole source for the Salt Palace, because there is no place like the Salt Palace. Sometimes we will have to formally, publicly post it. That's what I mean by formal. And we will work with you and determine the outcome. The odds of this one, this is going to be more rare than common. So these will be the 4. Your documentation that you will include with your end result will either be that email response, your PO or contract, and then don't forget that even when you do this and when you pay it, keep your group gathering whatever documentation finance requires. So what's State Purchasing's job again? Just to recap. State Purchasing's job is to help you do the procurement. It is not to check and make sure. We are not, when we do our job, we are not telling you you're following policy. Not our job. Okay, Jennifer, back to you, or questions open to the group.
Great. I just wanted to make one comment regarding what Tara was saying regarding rooms, lodging. They're going to be below individually $5,000. This is where you are expected to get per diem. If it ends up in a situation where you're buying everything from one vendor and there's a item on there that's a 5,000, or if it's going over 10 and you're going to be getting quotes, or anything of that nature, that's when it may become not relevant because you're going to go for the lowest cost option there. That's what I was trying to explain when I was talking about it depends.
Yeah.
So anyway, okay, we can go over
We got 9 minutes.
the questions in the chat really quickly. I've tried to answer some of them. We answered Mindy's, yes. All of that documentation has to be attached to your P card reconciliation. We got a question here that says, can meal costs exceed the per diem per person amount for group events that are less than 1,000? That answer is true for even amounts over 1,000. However, the overriding principle is it necessary and reasonable? Does your business purpose have a reason for why they need to exceed those amounts? It's all about documentation. Somebody put in there the link for the per diem, so we'll skip that question. Justin says not all events are limited to invitees. When we were talking about the number of invitees, that was retirement parties. And in order to provide a lunch, you are going to have limited to invitees. So remember that is only, we're talking about retirement events. When we were talking about that $20 person rule. I think Tara's count addressed the individual item. Okay, do division directors need to get written approvals for their supervisor for lunch meetings? This is going to go back to the amount. If your amount is under $1,000, then no, you just need supervisor approval. So if your supervisor is a division director, then yes, you need to. And again, remember, you get those approvals before you go to lunch, not after you go to lunch. Are delivery fees considered service fees? No. Again, delivery fees are allowed when they're reasonable given the situation. If your delivery fees are 50% of what your costs are, they're probably not reasonable. Or I saw one time a delivery fee that was more than the food that they were purchasing. That is not reasonable. So you have got to use your judgment. Does it make sense to pay that delivery fee, or is it more reasonable to pay an employee to go and pick that up and bring it back? So that one is a total judgment call.
I'll tell you that when I do my deliveries, if they charge me more for delivery, I cut their gratuity. You know, I'm not giving them both.
That is a great idea.
You don't get as much gratuity if you're charging me an astronomical delivery cost. But that's optics again. It's not.
Yes.
It's not policy.
If an event's open to the public, is a head count or attendance estimate enough? Yes, but you must document who's coming, why you're holding the event and who you're expecting to come. So if I have 3 presenters that total over 5,000, but no single presenter is getting more than 5,000, I still don't need to do quotes. Correct. Yes,
correct.
That is correct.
Each vendor, each presenter is their own solicitation process. So you're good.
Okay, this is a great question.
I will take that back. Unless they're all coming from the same organization and the organization is charging you, and then you might want to just have state purchasing look at it. You could email it to one of the people in the pod and let them take a look at the quote, and they can easily tell you. That's what they're paid. That's what they're paid to do, is help.
Right. So Tennille's asking who approves a lunch meeting for an executive director. That is a good question, and we don't have that addressed in policy. I would like the policy to be that it has to be one level higher, but right now it is not. So I would say for now, a deputy director would be fine. It would be best, obviously, if it was the chief of staff for that particular employee. I understand state travel is stepping back from the assisting with hotel contracts for group arrangements. Is this true? And will that now be a part of the procurement process?
That's state purchasing will now help you with that. And it's
And if you
probably
need help for lower amounts, you could also possibly work with the state travel office. We're working right now with Christofferson on getting a consistent answer on their ability to help book blocks of rooms and groups of people. So we don't have a firm answer for that right now because we've noticed some inconsistencies with the way Christofferson is handling something. So you may or may not be able to do it through the group gathering. I mean, through the state travel office, sorry. Yes, you must have a list of attendees for retirement events. All group gatherings need a list of attendees. If it's a large group and you've opened it up to various people, then put other state employees are welcomed into this. But let's say you're having the $20 meal, those 20 people's names need to be identified. Is that applicable to events that exceed 10K? I'm not sure what that question is referring to. Maybe a question Tara was answering, or maybe it was mine. I'm not sure. If Stephanie's here, maybe clarify what your question is. John, the answer to that question is yes, you can attach it to the whole report in Concur rather than each individual line, but it needs to be clear what lines it's applicable to.
Yeah.
So I'm not like, we don't want people guessing what expenses are related to that group gathering. So you've got to have a comment or something on your Concur report indicating what group gathering it's for and that it's attached generally to the report.
And that's why I do it to every single line. It's just
Yeah.
easy to attach.
It is the easiest. Can you answer Marie's question?
Read it to me. I'm not sure where you
For
are.
speakers over 5,000 that we don't want to necessarily do the lowest cost person, do we proceed to a professional service form or contact you first before proceeding with that?
So if you are very, very familiar with the professional service form and how to run the first part of the professional service, you can do that, but you will have to give, what we find is people aren't giving us the documentation we need required by law. So if you do that, my team's supposed to be pushing back and getting everything they need by law. So if you're familiar, you may run the first part of the professional service yourself. The negotiations must, by law, be done by state purchasing. However, state purchasing is also willing to help you at the start of that process. Hopefully that answered the question in a roundabout way.
Almost sounds like a sole source would be an easier option. Is that an
Sole source is not going to be the answer for training. There is no such thing as a sole
okay?
source.
All right.
Professional service is the answer.
Okay. Dawn.
I'm going to ask this instead of trying to type it out, but like on documentation, when it says sufficient documentation in any of the policies out here on the state finances site, like it doesn't say that unless it's one of these ones, but about the approvals, saying that you have proper approval for that item. Because when I'm looking like in the P card policy 21-2, 5A has documentation. But then it says 6, it says upload any other documentation necessary to show the purchase complied with the applicable GovOps division policies. Does that wrap up that approval in there?
Let me answer this question. And I've been worried about this ever since we put this in policy. So there was a decision made to use the term sufficient documentation instead of itemized receipt. That was done solely to prevent the use of the missing receipt affidavit when you had enough documentation with a combination of various documents to support your expense. It has nothing to do with any other sort of documentation. Sufficient documentation equals itemized receipt. where you have to have the date, the vendor, the items purchased, the cost per item, the total amount purchased, the method of payment. All of that documents sufficient documentation. If you have an itemized receipt, you have sufficient documentation. Don't use that definition like it's defined up in the top of the policy. Don't use that definition of sufficient documentation for anything other than that. Other documentation is what we're when we're talking about add your documentation to show you complied with policy. That's the FI-58. That's the list of attendees and their business relationship. It's any approvals that you needed before you incurred any of those expenses. Is that understandable?
Yes, thank you very much.
Okay, yes, you're welcome. Okay, it looks like our time is up. I am willing to stay on for a few minutes extra if there are any additional questions. Otherwise, we will wrap up. Emily.
Not a question, just a quick comment about the Concur when you're doing your documentation for a P card with your group gatherings. It is a best practice to attach it to the individual item rather than the report as a whole. You might get your report sent back from your approver because they won't be able to find your documentation if it's not attached to the line item. Just an FYI.
And that will depend on how that approver reviews, because if they open all receipts in a separate window, then it is available.
Yes, it would be available, but then they would have to do some digging and
correct,
attach
but
it
we
themselves.
won't.
Yeah.
We won't say it is wrong if we audit it and it is not attached to the individual.
Yes.
That's where I was answering for. So it depends on your agency and how your approver wants to handle that.
Truly.
So yeah, talk to your approver about how they want that handled, because when I approve P-card reconciliations, I'm 100% okay if they attach it to like the first expense, say they're buying lunch, the second expense is snacks. If they just tell me that the documentation for the group gathering is attached to the lunch expense, I'm totally fine with that. So it's going to depend on however your agency wants to handle that. But yes, I agree that it's best practice to attach to each expense. That is what policy says. Justin.
Hi, I'm sorry. Thank you. This has been a great training, clarified a lot of stuff for us. I don't mean to hold everybody up. So I know that there are a number of people in our group that are going to have questions, and some couldn't be here, so I wanted to make sure to follow up. The areas where it gets a little confusing for a few people is especially when we're hosting like multi-day retreats or trainings where, say, you hire one caterer that's going to do 5 meals for you or something like that, and they're going to charge you one payment, and that's going to be over 5,000, but no individual meal is. So exactly where to draw the line about what's an item in the cart. You know what I mean?
Justin, I want to just say one thing about that. If your event is over several days, it is all one group gathering.
Yes.
So it's all going to be on there. So like that's your first step, gathering your expense totals to know if you're over or under 10,000.
Great.
If you're under 10,000, or go for it.
So if it's still under 10,000, you're spending over 5. Let's just make it an even 6,000. Let's say you're spending 6,000 for food, and you're not spending anything else.
No, I mean, sorry, this is not an event I plan. It's somebody else that I'm asking who's not here, but I believe it's a retreat where it's say like 20 attendees over say 3 days, and the same caterer is going to provide breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
So again, the first step is the entire event over 10,000?
Right.
If it is, just throw it to state purchasing and let us make a call and send you an email.
Okay.
Let's say you're doing it at a state facility, nobody's getting rooms, you're literally only just doing food. At 5,500, the caterer is going to invoice, and you're going to request them to invoice the cost per meal.
Per meal. Great.
So it'll be meal 1. Here's the meal, the cost per meal. cost per meal, the cost per meal. So like, how many people did you say?
Say 20.
20 people. So the cost for meal one, that's going to be expensive food if you're going to 5,000.
Right.
What's yeah. So if the cost per meal for meal one is $25 a head, that's my individual item.
Great.
All those are under. So as long as every meal is under $5,000, your total can go all the way up to 10,000. But yeah, that's a lot.
Great. And then I'm just looking at per diem to make sure I'm being
You're looking at per
reasonable
diem.
per person. Okay. Wonderful.
But
Thank you.
again, the first stop is how much is the entire event costing me? And if it's over 10,000, let us make that call for you.
Wonderful. Thank you for clarifying.
Uh-huh.
One additional thing that I just thought of that I'd like to mention is that many departments are creating their own group gathering policy because they do not feel that our policy is strict enough. And therefore they may create their own policy, but it has to be more strict than ours. And it still has to follow purchasing policies. So just keep that in mind as if you're one of those agencies creating your own policy, it has to be stricter than ours. For example, you are requiring per diem for meals. That is 100% fine, but you need to have your written policy and keep in mind the over 10,000 rule. Okay. If you have any additional questions, feel free to message either Tara or me directly, and we're happy to answer any questions.
Perfect. I do need to drop. I got another meeting.
Great.
See y'all
Okay,
later.
thank you.
Thank you guys so much. Quick reminder that this training will be available in the meeting calendar invite once it's downloaded. I will also be sending out an email this afternoon, and it will be available on our finance website under the recent announcements on the homepage. Thank you guys so much for your time.